movies. It was pretty hard.
Next year, we'll make it happen.
Yeah.
Do they want us to keep our mic open when others are talking or mute? Did they say that? I don't remember.
Good question. Maybe we should mute just in case there's background noise.
Or if any of my kids come down and try to join.
I put a giant "Do Not Disturb" sign on my work office door, so people just pop in. And
I'm at the home office.
But yeah, maybe we can mute out of respect for whomever's speaking.
As long as you remember to unmute.
I know.
That's happened a million times.
Amazing.
Okay, I think we're on. So I'll kick off here and just say welcome to everyone. This is just in case you're in the wrong room. This is the Nextv Plus 4 p.m. panel discussion on the new role of social media in sports broadcasting. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Greg Bobolo. I'm the CEO of Seven Sports and Entertainment. Seven's a new company that launched this summer and works with leading rights holders and IP holders around the world, creating programming for a variety of digital endpoints. I've been in the sports business myself for quite some time now, held prior roles as CEO at STN Sports, and most recently, prior to Seven, was on the executive team at Wave Sports and Entertainment, running their partnerships team and strategy. With that said, I'd like to jump in and introduce the panelists. I'll start with Kristen O, who heads up sports partnerships for North America with media broadcasters at Meta. Welcome, Kristen.
Hi, great to be here.
And Megan Neal, Vice President, Social Media and Content Monetization at Motor Trend Group. Welcome, Megan.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us.
Scott Turkin. Scott, nice to see you again. Director of Digital Highlights at the National Lacrosse League.
Good to see you and everybody.
And then lastly, but not least, Brian Byrne, CEO and founder, Wave Sports and Entertainment, or WSE for short. Welcome, Brian.
I appreciate you, Greg. Good to be here. Thank you.
So I'm going to start off with a question for the group, and I'll direct the first person to answer for Kristen, if you don't mind. And the question is, what are the main drivers or motivations that sports rights owners should be developing for a successful social media strategy? Would that be more on expanding distribution, greater fan engagement, or new monetization opportunities?
Yeah, so I think, the thing about social is it has opened up a way for sports media broadcasters to have a two-way conversation with fans that they've never been able to have before. So quite literally through our platforms, Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp, you can use our DM feature, Messenger, to actually talk to your fans and see what kind of content is resonating with them. And I think that's a really, really interesting way to program against your accounts across, all social platforms that exist. But I think more than ever, it's been really important to engage a new fan base. And then in addition to that, obviously our monetization products across all of the Meta platforms, and then branded content has been a huge, huge driver for our partners to open up either whether new brand partnerships with a bunch of different brands within the ecosystem, or just ultimately drive an incremental revenue stream for them that's in addition to what they're doing in terms of their linear.
Got it. Thank you. And how, on the branded content side, just as a quick question there, how has that been, performing from an engagement point of view for you guys? Has that been working well for both sides of the equation?
Yeah, I'd say so. We've been really leaning heavily into Reels, and we rolled out both our Instagram branded content product on Reels and on Instagram as well on Facebook. So it's been a huge way for us. We call it our unconnected audience. So you're able to actually reach people who don't follow or like your accounts. And so that ensures that you can either open up a new fan base to your account that you might have never reached before, and you're also ensuring that brand touches that new fan as well. And so we've seen it as a really, really great revenue stream. And our studies have shown that the branded content incorporation and partnerships have boded really well for our partners.
Gotcha. Okay. Brian, how about for you? Main drivers?
Yeah, really. I mean, I think it's a combination of everything that you mentioned, Greg, and obviously you and I had a chance to work on a number of these things together at WSC for many years. But yeah, we've always taken the stance that developing programming for for this thing really should be thought of as no differently than more of a traditional network or television programming blocks, and so in doing so you're helping to both build and serve fandom. You're creating that quote unquote greater distribution, and then I think as the market continues to wrap their head around the idea that these different programming blocks, whether they're topical in nature or more commentary and debate, or even utilizing archival footage, your classic moments in sport. Those are really vessels for brands and sponsors to incorporate in the same kind of tried and true ways that sports TV and sports sponsorship has transacted for many years.
Thanks, Brian. And Megan, how about you at Motor Trend? What's your sort of lens or take on it?
Sure. Well, much like Brian said, we really view each of the things you mentioned as being very important. But at Motor Trend, we are definitely a fan-first brand. We have a huge reach. We serve about 3 to 4 billion impressions a year. So when we think about motorsports and cars, just in general, having that dialogue, having that fan engagement is just so incredibly important. And then an added benefit that we see is driving that upper funnel awareness. We've actually started launching our FAST strategy. So we're leaning very heavily into social to help convert some of those younger, more social forward audiences.
Thank you. And Scott, from a league perspective.
Yeah, from a league perspective, we lean on social, the various platforms in different ways. YouTube is sort of and Facebook are sort of our longer form highlights where fans can get the deeper, full analysis. We see really great view duration on most of our videos we put on there. We've started to lean in a lot more on the sort of ephemeral type of media, like IG stories and Snap. We see that fans really like to engage with stuff they can't find on a broadcast or a stream. And just like I know Twitter's changing quite a bit, but we find a lot of our audience is very engaged, especially in the moment during games. We see great. We actually saw it was our first weekend of games last weekend, and it had a 320% increase over the previous month in terms of Twitter video views. Now, again, that's a little bit I'm cherry picking the data a little bit, but it's pretty. It's shows how if you're in the moment and engage with your audience, you can get really nice distribution and engagement.
Great. Thanks, Scott. Circling back to Kristen, an understanding there's going to be some overlapping in this question between Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, all having distinctive audience characteristics. What specific use cases are your sports media partners sort of favoring on each of these platforms?
Yeah, so I think Scott alluded to this a little bit, and he's seen it work well with the National Lacrosse League. But it is true that Facebook, we've seen the long form content work really well, especially because our in-stream product is more developed on that platform. So you can actually see higher CPMs and bigger returns on what you're doing with long form. And in addition to that, we actually, it was about a year ago, got rid of IGTV, which was our service for long form content on Instagram. And so Instagram has really been sort of the go-to for short form. Obviously, you can still post 15-minute plus content, but we've seen that in terms of engagement, and what works well is actually that shorter form. And what's also interesting is that stories has been a really good way for a lot of our partners to program to things that are sort of like in the moment and live, and trying to get that snapshot of news within 24 hours. The stories on Facebook is less developed, but still a platform again that reaches people and can get sort of a quick snapshot. Whereas Instagram, feed and Facebook feed is more of that green content, in addition to highlights from the week prior or the weekend prior. But we've definitely seen shorter form work on Instagram, and we're trending towards that on Facebook. That is something we're starting to see, especially with our in-stream product developing in the short form space on Facebook. But both of them, it's actually interesting because there's not actually a ton of audience overlap when you look at Facebook and Instagram, if you look at a particular account. And I think that's a really interesting way that you can actually put the same piece of content, whether it's 60 seconds, to 5 minutes on both platforms, and you might be able to reach, 70%, 75% of two different types of audiences, which is pretty fascinating.
Indeed. Question for Megan on your sort of digital setup there, operations, how they're structured. Just for the audience, how many social media properties do you guys own? How big of a team do you have set up there? Main roles with the team, and then lastly, what type of content are you guys producing for that digital audience?
Sure. Yeah, we think a lot about our structure and the best structure that would serve both the organizations, but of course, first our fans. So I'll kind of break down our structure a little bit. It's probably a little unique. But yeah, as I mentioned, we generate about anywhere from 3 to 4 billion impressions a year on behalf of Motor Trend and all of our sub brands. We are actually on over 200 platforms. So as you can imagine, managing over 200 platforms, plus our various partners at Meta and Twitter and all of our tools. We have about 32 different partners and tools that we use. And then what we've really leaned into just from a team structure standpoint over the past few years is really hiring more content creators. So I have about 4 dedicated content creators. Some of them appear in front of the camera as talent, as well as produce and edit, and they create amazing native, often very viral content. We also have a team of paid that rolls into me. So where we're working on more of the monetization aspect of social media and branded content, they're running those campaigns to deliver on our clients' expectations. And then I have a couple of dedicated channel managers, as well as you can imagine, with producing anywhere from 50,000 to 75,000 stories a year. I have a content coordinator that helps us manage all of the video, all of the photos, everything that we do. And yeah, I think, did I answer all of those? There was a few in there. What content's working best?
Yes. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, thank you to Kristen and team for all of your, developments on your video properties. We've seen tremendous success on Reels and all of our vertical video stories. We launched with the Bronco team, our TikTok channel a while back, and have leaned very, very heavily into that. And then we have one of the largest automotive YouTube channels. We do a lot of live streams and live coverage of our own events, others' events. So that's also a very successful property that we're also leaning heavily into YouTube Shorts. That actually now accounts for about 30% of our channel views. So I would say that vertical native content is performing very well for us.
Excellent. And Kristen, is that something you do on a regular basis? Is help partners like Motor Trend find lanes of success?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Megan can attest to this, and probably Scott and Brian as well. The changing trends in what's happening on platform, especially not just Meta's platforms, but all of the social platforms, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, like the trends and what's popping changes so rapidly that I commend the teams hugely, because I think it's a full-time job to be able to come up with those trends. But for the most part, yeah, Reels has been a major investment for us, and something, I hope that everyone on this call has seen the fruits of their labor from. But it's really important for us on a daily basis to support these type of partners and making sure that they have not only the latest product updates or features that they can test out, but also understanding what's trending and what's working, what's resonating with fans.
Good segue there for you, Scott. Speaking about trends changing, and Motor Trend's 50 to 75,000 stories that they're sort of managing through here. Social media is a garden that needs to be constantly maintained. How does that process to consistently generate and distribute highlights for you over social media work from a league's perspective?
Yeah, so we have a team that I lead that has sort of three different concentrations. One is the social producer, who are in charge of our distribution. Then we have highlight editors who cut our highlights, both our quick turnaround highlights and our compilation highlights that I mentioned earlier that go on Facebook and YouTube. And then we have a social event content producer, which is once a weekend, they go to a game. They're trying to get great behind the scenes content to bring fans to the more granular, cool things about the game of lacrosse, which, just like hockey and other sports, the NBA and NFL are doing this quite a bit. Fans really seem to eat that content up. So in terms of the garden, when the games are on, that's when we know our audience is the most engaged, and that's when we have the most resources, most brain power, we try to do bespoke content for each platform, so it's the most authentic. I think over the course of time, I think more and more people have found that you can't just have a one size fits all on social media. You can't just produce one piece of content. Maybe you can, like Sports Illustrated did with Steph Curry, that works on all platforms, but most content doesn't. So it's really important for us to have people that are good with Instagram and know Instagram stories, and people that are good with YouTube and know how to, optimize the content right. And so that's how we tend to do it. We have a great team at the National Lacrosse League that it's kind of amazing. We're all over North America, because if folks didn't know, the NLL is 5 teams in Canada and is the national sport of Canada. So we get a big audience in Canada there as well. So we have one person in Peterborough, Ontario, and the rest of our team is all over the country. And we just use Slack, and we use a service called Audio, which is an excellent cloud-based production service that we use for basically everything we do. And somehow we make it work, and we get a lot of good content out there. We've been growing year over year considerably. Last year, we don't have quite the Motor Trend amazing metrics, but we had 40 million social impressions and about 10 million video views. That doesn't count Instagram, because some of our data there is we like to think our video views were a little higher, but pretty good. And we're continuing to grow year over year. That was about a 28% growth. So we're seeing all that strategy pay off for us.
And Scott, do you program any differently? You have, is it 5 teams in Canada and 10 is that the split?
Yep, 5 and 10. No, we just try to be we try to be equitable to all the teams and really promote the teams and players. Probably our best known player is Lyle Thompson, who plays for Georgia. He's also a star on the PLL. The Toronto Rock is probably the most marquee team in Canada, just based on media market size and the fact that they've won a lot over the 36-year history. They were one of the dynasties for a certain period of time. So, we try to be as authentic as possible to sort of speak the fans' language. Like most sports, there's some sort of real inside the beltway or inside baseball references, and some of those are a little different for our Canadian teams than our US teams, but we're just trying to we don't like bifurcate that, really. There's not a Canadian strategy and a US strategy. So it's just we want to show people that our growing sport and how cool it is. We like to say that it's sort of the perfect mix of basketball and hockey. And if anyone's ever been to an NLL game, they can see that. So that's what we try to get across with all the stuff we do.
Great, thanks, Scott. So Brian, question for you. Wave has been very successful in creating programming for these digitally native sports fans across a wide variety of social media platforms. And speaking about audiences and generating large ones, again, which Wave has done incredibly well, what would you say are the main challenges of producing and programming video content for these largely elusive digitally native sports fans?
So I think, and I'll probably circle back to something that's that Scott mentioned a few moments ago too. But really starting at the top, there was just this fundamental belief that fandom is still as strong as ever, especially with this next generation, and that while call it more traditional means of viewership or content consumption, that might be changing, or might be different from even when I grew up. You still had hundreds of millions, if not billions, of fans worldwide across traditional and non-traditional and newer and emerging sports. So that I think first and foremost it was really why we started the company. Then when it comes down to the programming, as I mentioned, kind of circling back to something that that Scott mentioned, which is always very top of mind for us, is you have to be very distinctive about the formats that you're developing, and really develop formats specific to the platforms. And so what I mean by that is you're going to produce a show differently for a Snapchat versus a TikTok versus an Instagram, and certainly some of the longer form stuff that we do in the the podcast and vodcast world. Everything is produced for each of those respective platforms, which I think is no different than how networks have thought about media or programming for generations on end. You come up with a formula or a playbook that works in any one of these respective areas. There's probably going to be some distinct component of that. So I definitely think that has been something that we've always been very, very focused on.
Thanks, Brian. Makes sense. Circling back to Chris said, changing gears a little bit into the augmented and virtual reality features of platforms such as the MetaQuest headsets, and what role they play in sort of the future of live sports transmissions and experiences, in your opinion?
Yeah, if I had a nickel for every time someone said the metaverse in my day to day, I'd be retired by now. But yeah, so it's a obviously a huge portion of my time is spent thinking about this space and testing in this space already. Actually, about a month ago, we launched a new app called X Stadium. So this is an app that lives natively in the Quest headset today, and it allows leagues, broadcast partners, anyone who has a sports affiliation or sports IP to go in and create a custom room that gives that experience to any fan who has a Quest. So we have some partners that are live within NASCAR. BN Sports is actually launching later this month. So we're building out that experience, and it's really made for the sports fan, which I think is something that we haven't really touched on before from like a meta standpoint. But outside of that, like virtual reality and augmented reality also exists within just the Facebook and Instagram platforms today. A lot of our partners are taking advantage of AR filters around like a tentpole event or around a championship game, or if there's a moment in sports that they want to take advantage of, they're creating those AR filters and gamifying the experience, which fans seem to go crazy for, which is great. And then virtual reality, I think one of the hard things that we're learning about this space is that it's not as easy as a turnaround as what has been set up from a broadcast standpoint today, and it's costly. And so I think as we look at the future, like ideally we'll be breaking down some of those barriers to make the VR broadcasting a little bit more attainable for folks, because we have Olympics in headset, we have X Games in headset, we have NBA games in headset, and the experience in which you're viewing those games or an event is incredible. There's really nothing like it. And if you're a mega fan of any of those sports, or even just a casual fan, I think the experience is really unique. And we're going to be thinking about how we can make that more accessible for fans across all of our platforms and within headset in the near future.
So lots of stuff.
Yes. To summarize.
That's amazing. Okay. Scott, question for you. Will the metaverse rather help transform highlights from your perspective, into more of a immersive, sort of personalized experience for your fans?
That's it. I think the jury's out a little bit on that one. I'm not really quite sure. I think that NBA Top Shot sort of burst on the scene and sort of created this whole marketplace of these moments for fans that and then I think that that's really dependent, and I was like very into it. I've been in crypto for 6 years. I really liked it, and then that's really dependent upon if crypto is thriving or not, in my opinion. So I'm not really quite sure if All Day or some of these other players that have entered the marketplace, if that's really something that people are going to resonate with or not. I still think that it's still really cool if you love a sport to just lean back with the least amount of friction on your social channels and get highlights or get your material. So I think that, two-factor authentication and some of the other stuff, Google Authenticator that you have to do in a lot of crypto things for security, that may be an impediment to it growing there. I'd love to see it grow. I thought it was very exciting to see what Top Shot has done, and I think there's a lot of smart people at Dapper who are doing some really cool material. But I don't know if I'm personally sold on it yet.
Okay, thanks. Switching gears again a little bit here, Megan, jumping into some questions live. What's the impact live events have for you on your social media business as a whole, and how do you sort of look at that between those, linking the two?
Yeah, we at Motor Trend, we have a very thriving, we're happy to say the events are back for us. Obviously, for a while, we had to put a pause on that due to the, COVID restrictions and things of that nature, but we're back. We're producing events. This past year, we did about 16 of them of our owned and operated events, as well as some events that we produced for clients. So social media is a huge component of that. We have our content creators on the ground capturing all of the action. In some cases, we're actually capturing more evergreen content that we post after the fact or much later down the road. We actually produced a really cool live event on Woodward Ave. We shut down Woodward Ave in Detroit, and we do street legal racing. Thousands of cars come through. We incorporate our talent, our meet and greets. My team's there sort of capturing it all. We do all of our pre-promotion, et cetera. And then the other component is we have a partnership with WIC in the motorsports industry. They produce 24-Hour of Le Mans, which we carry on Motor Trend streaming and some of our other properties. So we're obviously covering that event. It's an amazing event, super iconic, and social media absolutely plays a part of that. So we structure our team in a way that we're figuring all of that out and getting the word out around those events that we're carrying and streaming as well.
Excellent. A question for Brian and Megan. Maybe Brian, if you want to take the lead. Always an interesting question to try and figure out what is the most important metric really to determine impact or success of a social media strategy.
So I would say engagement and community building, and I'll be a bit more specific. Greg, I think you've heard me use this analogy or tell this story before, but I've always thought of our business as actually being a hospitality business, and that's no different than a restaurant or a bar or any sort of entertainment venue. The minute you walk in, there is either going to be a positive or a negative reaction. So is the decor nice? Were you greeted presently? Was the service high quality? Was the food good, or were the drinks good? So on and so forth. Did you have a great time? And if the answer is yes, what do? You tell your friends and your family, like, oh, I just went to this thing. It was amazing. You should go. You go back. You spend more money. You tip a greater amount. And I think of our businesses as being no different. At the end of the day, whether it's 30 seconds or 60 seconds or an hour-long podcast or anything in between, you're ultimately asking people to give you the most precious thing in their life, which is their time, to engage with a piece of programming that you might put out. And so what it boils down to is, again, was the format good? Did you have the right type of IP? Were you able to create a narrative arc that's actually interesting to people? If it's more personality or talent based, did you have the right talent? And then if you do those things effectively, people are going to engage. And in our world, that's liking, that's commenting, that's clicking and copying the link to send it to their friends in a group chat or what have you. And then ultimately, that's also actually getting folks to transact with you at a certain point. And so, if you do those things, it's a classic kind of credit and debit system. If you treat these people well, if you treat your fans well, whether you're serving, many hundreds of millions of people, like we do every month, or, whether it's the, small bar on the corner, I think the same, principles apply in the entertainment industry.
A very thoughtful approach leading up to engagement ultimately. Yeah. Kristen?
Oh, I think was this one for me?
Sorry, Megan.
That's okay. Yeah, I mean, listen, I think when I think about the advertiser side of our business, there's always a lot of conversation about reach and scale, and those are great things. And I'm probably lucky to have such a big audience, 110 million global fans. And I'm super proud of that number. I think that's a testament to a lot of our editorial team hopping on social media platforms very early on. We have amazing photography, amazing video, amazing sports rights that we can broadcast out. So it is really all about that content that got us there. But I'm with Brian in that me and my team, we tend to focus much more on qualitative metrics such as engagement rate. We have at any given time, we're beating industry norms by 40, 50, 60%. I'm super proud of that. I'm thinking about our organic virality, which is obviously sometimes very hard to achieve these days, but we tend to do it on the regular. Are people sharing our content? Are people commenting? Dialogue with us? Those are the things that really matter to me. And then, we also have a editorial presence as well. So me and my team are constantly thinking about how we, drive awareness of Motor Trend and the content we're making and engaging our audience, but also bringing them into our own funnel to read our stories, go deeper and see more of our content that we have.
Thanks, Megan. Another sort of crystal ball question for you, Kristen. The future. What areas do you feel are going to be sort of liking themselves to new innovation? What is the most generally the most interesting topics for you moving forward? Looking forward in the future here.
Yeah, I think we think a lot about like personalization and how you can bring your physical self to your sort of virtual self across all of, again, the meta platforms and beyond. And so we did actually a quick test of I wouldn't say quick, actually it took some time and effort and money and resources on our side, but we did a partnership with the NFL around the Super Bowl this past February, where you could actually wear the t-shirt of your team that you're rooting for. And that lived as your avatar and in Instagram, in Facebook, in the metaverse. And I think this is going to be only built out further. So being able to, change your hat, when we go from baseball to football season, or if you want to, on the weekends, if you're watching with a friend in the metaverse, could you change to a your college football team versus what you're going to wear on Sunday for NFL. So I think the innovation is really going to be able to personalize who you are and be able to communicate who you are, and being able to customize exactly how you want to be represented and make sure it represents you and your sports fandom. So I think that's a big bet for us, and we're trying to figure out ways to really go deeper in that space.
Interesting. Yeah, certainly exciting across the board to see where that evolves into. Scott, question for you. You were at ESPN, I believe, for some 26 some odd years. And the question is about sort of, how is the growing role of social media, transformed the production workflow for you guys, at a traditional, sports network?
Yeah, I mean, when I was there leading SportsCenter day to day from 2012 to 2015, we had a really small team. I was actually the first person to post on SportsCenter's Instagram feed, which was kind of a cool career milestone. But I was at the time I was leading and doing. You know what I mean? So it was I think now ESPN, I haven't been there for several years, but now I think they have like 75 people on their social team. We had like 6, so I think that really has changed over time. People know, like we talked about before, how you can't have a one size fits all strategy, and you need to have people. Like TikTok is a huge deal. It's got 1 billion monthly active users, but you can't just like plant your flag in the ground and put out TikTok content. It has to be authentic. It has to be produced well in the way that the users want it, or else it's just going to fall flat and you're not going to do it. So I think, it's changed quite a bit. I think some people tend to overthink things a little bit in the social media space and try to outsmart themselves. I'm a big believer in trying to break stuff, especially on new and emerging platforms. Just go out and freaking, like, the people I tell to do the social event content creator, I'm just like, listen, you have a blank slate. Make sure we get X here, X here, X here, and X here, and make it cool and make it authentic to the platform. So I think the short answer is it's changed considerably, particularly in the 10 years since I was not 10 total, but whatever, in the decades since I sort of started in the social media space at ESPN. It's changed quite a bit. And yeah, it's interesting to see where it'll go from here. Now there's things, younger people don't like Facebook anymore, and people, whether it's your political affiliation, you might not like Twitter anymore. So who knows what it is? I think it's all evolving, and I think that as content creators and people at leagues that are trying to reach fans, especially those really premium that for advertisers, Gen Z, millennial fans that are really important. You just have to know and have to really stay on top and be very what's the right word? Malleable, maybe, to change with the trends. And it's changed 1 million times in the 10 years since I was sort of started at sports.
Yeah, I think everyone can attest to the that change, and even growth in staffing, just remarkable. I've seeing teams grow from 1 or 2 to 10, 20, 30x. It's been interesting to see that growth. Brian, question for you: do you think there's any direct relationship between the popularity of any given sport and the size of the social media communities that those particular sports generate, or are there certain sports that are simply better predisposed to the nature of social media?
So the short answer is yes. I think there's probably some nuance to it. That perhaps I'll get to in a moment. But to use an analogy, perhaps from call it, what did we used to do to what are we doing now? Like, people bought billboards and you would buy television commercials because you were trying to grow popularity of whatever that might be. More simply put, those were means, even radio, right? Those were means to get in front of the masses, to disseminate some sort of information. And so I think today, especially when we're thinking about that kind of Gen Z and young millennial fan, the question is, well, where are they spending their time? It's very much on this thing, and it's on the half dozen or so odd different social and digital platforms. And so if you're a sports property or a league or a rights holder, if you're able to get your IP out there, if you're able to develop storytelling and programming that is going to be resonant, I tend to think that that's going to lead to an increase or greater fandom within that, respective vertical. Obviously, the nuances, some sports are larger than others. Some sports are, quote unquote, very much global, whereas some might be, more focused or, in a particular, part of the world. So not all fandom is, is the same, shape or size. But I definitely think, and obviously I'm biased, this is a big part of our business, but I definitely think, having a presence and, really being mindful, of being in these places, can help lead to, greater awareness and stronger fandom over time.
Yeah. And keeping you on, next question is a group question, but I'll keep you on the spot for this one because I think it's a good segue. What do you make of these market reports that suggest there's a significant audience decline affecting traditional sports broadcasts? And is it sports consumption? Is it failing amongst younger generations, or is it simply migrating to other formats? Such as highlights, or maybe to other platforms, other social networks. What's your viewpoint on that?
Is that for me, Greg? You want me to kick that one off? Well, yeah. I mean, I certainly, I certainly don't think that fandom is decreasing. I think it's just it's evolving, or the way that this younger generation watches and talks about sports, is evolving. There's many more places to consume content. The formats certainly vary. Obviously you got your more traditional live viewing experience, but even that is changing, where it's not just on network television. You have streaming options, more on demand, if you will. And then in the world that we've been speaking a lot about today, you have your short and kind of mid-form programming, whether it's highlight driven or personality driven or what have you. That I think it's fair to say that that younger generation is really inclined to to consume and engage with. And really, back to my my previous response, if you lean into all these different avenues or destinations where these fans are, I tend to think that there's going to be a higher probability for those fans to either still watch a live game or transact and buy merch or a hat or whatever that might be. So that's my general point of view on it, and I suppose I'll pause there.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Yeah,
Greg,
yeah,
Greg, if you don't mind, I'll jump in here as well. I think that one of the biggest challenges, I think that some of the studies or things that coming out that say that like people don't care anymore, I think that's just BS. I think that the measurement is really behind the consumption, particularly in sports media. I mean, I know in my basement, I don't want to mess up my camera because I got a bunch of stuff in the way, but I have like 3 streaming only TVs that I stream all the games on. There is no way that they can measure all that. It's all in the same house. It's all in the same account. Like, I'm sure it's some way to do it, but like in addition, the Nielsen ratings, they're still the gross ratings point for the TV business, but they're 5 to 10 years behind. I mean, there's no way that they can account for all the hotels and all the bars and all the people on their phones. I just don't see that. I think that there's a way more options now. It's not 3 networks and ESPN and maybe Fox Sports. It's a million places. I mean, my NBA League Pass is on Prime TV, and I watch Paramount Plus. I think I have to watch NFL games. It's just there's all these different ways. I think it's impossible to measure all of it. I think that the ways that fans are consuming it is continuing to evolve. I know my kids. My kids are 14, 13, and 11. They watch a ton of YouTube. They probably don't know. I mean, I still pay for my cable bill. They don't even know how to turn on cable anymore. But they watch, highlights on YouTube. They watch shows on YouTube. They watch influencer channels on YouTube. So I think it's just a matter of I think it's BS. I don't think that sports fandom is growing negatively. I think it's actually growing considerably, just with younger fans and fans who are more seasoned in how to find it. They're just finding it in different ways. And it's just, I think it's incumbent upon, whether it's Nielsen or whether it's other folks who do ratings, I think it's incumbent upon them to step up their game and get better data so that we can see the audiences, what the true audiences are.
Megan, what's your point of view at Motor Trend?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Scott. I think the measurement's broken and hence the results that we see. So at Motor Trend, I think we actually do, in absence of not having these comprehensive tools, we look at the success of our programs and sports programs holistically. So especially when we're working with our partners like at NASCAR or 24 Hours of Le Mans, we aggregate that data. We show how many people came to our live and in-person events, how many people looked at highlights and clips, how many people viewed the YouTube live stream. We have a traditional linear network, so of course we get those ratings, and Live Plus 3 we look at, but we also have a streaming service. So we report out, all of that data that shows the viewership across all the various streaming platforms as well as social channels. So unfortunately, we have to do that ourselves, and there's not a comprehensive tool that helps us do that. So it's a lot of data mining, a lot of reporting, but we want our partners to see the comprehensive effect of how we distribute our content and what that does for our brand as well as theirs. And I will say one additional thing. I think COVID actually played a role in maybe propelling even more fandoms. We were so isolated. At one point, I remember people were watching marbles race, right? So now that we can be out and in society and much safer, we're selling out our events faster than we ever have. We're seeing more interest. I think people want that togetherness and want to rally around, the World Cup that's happening right now. Devastated that the USA lost, of course. But I was shocked at how many people showed up to watch that game on the middle of a Tuesday, I think it was. So there may be that aspect as well. I actually feel like it's growing, if anything.
Kristen, final words on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think number one is the measurement is broken. You can't measure a social fan compared to a linear fan, right? We're lacking tons of tools to overlap or see lack of overlap between those two types of fans. And I also think in terms of a growing fandom versus shrinking, the fandom these days around sports is so different because of social. You can be a fan of, in my case, the losing Patriots fan, but I'm actually still a massive, Travis Kelce fan, for example, right? So you can actually, I think probably 10, 15, 20 years ago, you had your team and you watched it on your local network and that was it, right? But now because of social, you can be tapped into someone's life and you might actually like their personality and their family and be clued into what they're doing and be so much more involved from a fan standpoint than just what's on your local network or what's on your cable. So I think fans are becoming increasingly more well-rounded, and that actually has allowed for an increase in fandom across all sports.
Listen, I'm gonna have to get you some Kelsey New Heights Show merch.
Send it my way. I'll send you my address after.
Hey, I want one too. I love those guys.
So I think probably the last question for the group here, we are running out of time. Influencers, pretty hot topic. Are they a necessity to a social media strategy? Are they an overrated, egocentric sort of digital group of, stars? What's your viewpoint and perspective on that? I'll kick off with Megan.
Yeah, we work with a lot of influencers here at Motor Trend, Jack Shepard, Kevin Hart, mega influencers like those guys. But let me give an example of actually an influencer strategy that I think was very authentic to us and our audience. There's a young woman, Alex Taylor. She had participated in that same street legal drag racing I mentioned on Woodward Avenue. She was our youngest participant at age 16. She's a racer. She's a builder. She knows a lot of our talent because of her participation. She showed up 2 years ago and actually won the whole thing, which is an incredible feat. And we started conversations with her, and earlier this year we made her a co-host of the show. And that was because we had sort of pressure tested her with her audience. They love her. Everyone was cheering her on. So much positive sentiment. She fits into the Motor Trend ecosystem great. We're super proud to have a female co-host to continue a series on Hot Rod Garage. So she's been a genuine influencer of her show and of the brand, but it was homegrown and very organic. So that's the type of influencer strategy that I like and would tend to lean into.
Great. Scott, how about you? Scott?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's influencers are great, and there's some great reach components. I mean, Brian, as we just talked about, the Kelsey brothers. I mean, Travis Kelsey is one of the best tight ends. I think the best tight end ever in NFL history. Who plays for a marquee team. You put out a podcast with Travis Kelsey. To me, that's a content strategy, but it's also an influencer strategy. At least the way I see it. I think that, when it's smart and there's good levers of distribution that you can utilize for your content, and you can get people to buy in that have a huge reach, like The Rock, or like you said, Kevin Hart, someone like that. I mean, that's especially for sort of younger growing brands or ascendant brands. I mean, I think it's hard to really quantify what that means, but I think it's definitely can be impactful if done the right way.
And Brian, for you, obviously been a recent rather measure of success for you guys at Wave. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I'll be short because I know we're running up on time here, but so the long and the short of it is I think the future of this industry and sports programming or sports and entertainment is talent led, digitally native personalities, or athletes alike, or what have you, which is no different than the traditional network game. The Stuart Scotts, the Linda Cohens, the Chris Bermans of the world, Scott Van Pelt, so on and so forth, right? Doris Burke. So I think now it's that digitally native face and voice that is ultimately rising to the forefront.
And over to you, Kristen, again for the final thought on that.
Yeah, I agree and echo what everyone has said. I think with broadcasters and influencers and creators, it's a two-way street, right? Because the creators can learn from the traditional broadcasters and actually, borrow their IP to build credibility to their fan base. And then in turn, the creators help, the traditional broadcasters either build a younger audience, give them more content to push out. So I think it's here to stay is my big bet. And I think it's something that benefits both parties in the long run.
Okay, well, I think we are at time, as I have been instructed anyhow. So I think that concludes the discussion on the new role of social media in sports broadcasting. I just want to thank everyone for tuning in today, and then to also thank all of the panelists for your time. And I hope to see you all again in the near future. It was great to see you today, and really good discussion.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.